What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I'm back with yet another album review. This time I'm talking about the latest offering from Milwaukee-based death metal legends Morta Skuld with Creation Undone. This also comes out on February 23rd, this time on Peaceville Records, and well, this is a band I have long needed to get into and talk about. I do have their album Dying Remains, but I haven't fully dove into it just yet. Mostly just because I have so many fucking albums in my collection, it's hard to keep up at times. But I did want to check this new one out because after all, I've heard so many good things about this band, so I figured why not give it a shot with a new album. I was not prepared for the level of badassery this album has. So, Morta Skuld, from what I know, they are a death metal band from Milwaukee, kind of like one of the pioneers of the Wisconsin death metal scene, and they very much are like one of the kings of old school death metal in the Midwest. Like, lots of nods to Florida death metal, like Cannibal Corpse and Monstrosity, and maybe even some other bands from elsewhere, like Death and Blood Red Throne, I would say, is a pretty good comparison point. But we kick things off with We Rise, We Fall. I almost said We Rise. We Rise, We Fall. And here is pretty much where you're going to get most of the particular ingredients of this album. This track has thrashy riffs and rhythms, like it's at Mach 10 thrash speed. Some nasty tremolo riffs, and these tremolo riffs kind of vary in terms of influence. Like here, it was more Cannibal Corpse than anything else, but there's some killer fucking groove, not just on this track, but across the board. And also, this album even borders brutal death metal at times, like bands like Suffocation and Baphomet, kind of has a little bit of that like slightly more brutal edge, as far as like the riffs and the grooves and the breakdowns galore. But another big thing that pops up here and there is sinister melodies. Like they sound like they're just descending into the depths of hell with these melodies. These are definitely not melodies that would appease anyone that isn't into death metal, far from it. These melodies are meant to sound evil, grimy, and dark. Then we get into the End of Reason, and it starts off with a brief, eerie, dissonant moment, kind of like Immolation, but then it gets into a nice double-time gallop, and there's plenty of double time to go around on this entire album, as well as Chug City or Riff City, whatever you want to call it. Just awesome stuff. Triplet chugs. Give me all the triplet chugs that I could want, and you get it on this track and some others. Then we get into Painful Conflict, which this one almost feels like a mishmash of... stupid gnat. Yeah, I caught the gnat, so I gotta wash my hands after this. This song felt like a mishmash of Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, and even Incantation, because it starts off with, like, Morbid Angel grooves and tremolo riffs that kind of feel like Morbid Angel, but then as the song progresses, it starts becoming more closer to Cannibal Corpse with the thrashy rhythms and the riffage and the blast beats. But then you get some like Incantation style apocalyptic tremolo riffs, which just I love those, especially when a band like Incantation knows how to make everything sound like it's crumbling beneath your feet. Then we get into Unforeseen Obstacles, which this one definitely takes Triplet Chug to a whole new level on this album thus far. And this song kind of has a lot of... reminds me a lot of Blood Red Throne, Decapitated, and Monstrosity. Hell, there's even a riff on here that reminds me of... I want to say it's the first Damned off of Decapitated's Winds of Creation album. If you do an A-B on those songs, you might understand where I'm coming from on this. Now, one thing I haven't talked about with this album is the lead work. The lead work is pretty solid all throughout. They kind of vary from shred to, like, atmospheric melodies, or just more or less there to just feel evil and dark for the most part. And then we get into Perfect Prey, which this one kind of has a nice balance of thrashiness and groovy chugs, but still having blast beats and tremolos all throughout. Lots of crawling riffs, too, that sound like they just descend even further. Then Soul Piercing Sorrow. This one definitely reminded me a lot of Blood Red Throne, not only in like the chugs and the grooves, but even in the tremolos and the thrashiness of it. Made me think of stuff like Affiliated with the Suffering, for example, kind of gave me nods to that. But one other thing I forgot to mention and to talk about, the production of this album, which this is a good time to talk about because the bass parts on Soul Piercing Sorrow were very, very audible in the mix. So that brings us to the production. Sorry if I'm stumbling. I've been recording all night, so bear with me. But it's like here with the production, it's like it still remains raw and nasty, but the mix, I believe the mix was done by Dave Otero, who has done work with Cattle Decapitation and Allegiant and a bunch of other bands. Yeah, it sounds raw and nasty in the production side of things, but the mix that Dave Otero does, excellent job, and also the bass is pretty prevalent throughout, and this moment with the blast beats on Soul Piercing Sorrow, perfect example of that. Into Temptation, a little more slower, like it's got more slower grooves, almost like Obituary to some extent, but with some dissonant melodies that come up here and there. Chugs galore, the whole 9 yards, little thrashy bits, so on and so forth. Self-Destructive Emotions, this one I got little nods to like modern bands like Gatecreeper because it's got a little more of like a hardcore groove going on. Like a good chunk of this song has a little bit of hardcore inspired death metal to it, like Gatecreeper or Creeping Death, like a lot of the more recent modern bands. But you do get some like quick diarrhea blast beats that like blast beat where it sounds like diarrhea is going everywhere, but also more triplet chugging. And this is one of the songs that has a more melodic lead. Then we get into Oblivion, which this one, like the galloping riffs and the rhythms at the beginning made me think of early 90s Death. But as the song progresses, it gets more double time with more machine gun riffing, but then you get chugging breakdown sections that feel like suffocation. And then the final track, By Design, starts off more interesting with clean guitars, but then that riff turns heavy, and it almost feels like a monstrosity song, like something off of Spiritual Apocalypse, but it's also like borderline on Death Doom a little bit because it's a lot slower than a lot of other tracks, but you get the bendies, like just bend those fucking riffs, triplet chugs all around, and you end with a more dissonant melody. So, yeah, for my first time checking this band out with a new album, I was pretty impressed with how catchy this was, with the chugs, the thrashy riffs, the tremolo riffs, the grooves, some of the dissonance that pops up, just barely on this album, like only in small increments on a couple of tracks. And I love the old school approach of like, let's just go for it. As far as any complaints, I would say maybe a few riffs, especially songs in the middle. There are some riffs that do feel indistinct and kind of run together. But overall, I thought this was a great album. I am going to give this one a 4 out of 5. I thought this was a pretty damn good offering, and now I need to check out more Morta Skuld, as well as listen to Dying Remain, since I have that on CD, but I just haven't gotten around to listening to it yet. But that's just me being stupid. But of course, these are all just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.